Being able to rapidly deploy a slew of combat units across the battlefield is something that every military around the world yearns for. From the breakout of a specific conflict to deploying a serious contingent of forces within mere days, mobility is a crucial part of any military's fighting prowess. But moving and deploying tanks and heavy armor is logistically never an easy task. The weight and limited speed of most heavy main battle tanks makes it difficult for them to navigate terrain and limits their means of transport. And during the Cold War, with tensions running high between NATO and the Warsaw Pact, and war looking more inevitable day by day, the US military knew it needed a new, light armored vehicle that they would be able to deploy and, most importantly, airdrop into enemy territory at a moment's notice. And what they would create in response to this need was none other than the M551 Sheridan. Hello everyone, welcome to War Machines. This is the channel where we dive into the past and explore some of the most prolific armored military vehicles of the last 100 years. If you want to see more short-form documentaries on vehicles like the Sheridan and many others, then make sure to tune into the channel every single week for our new videos. But now, back to the Sheridan. The M551 Sheridan was an armored reconnaissance/airborne assault vehicle developed by the US during the Cold War era. It was primarily designed to provide rapid mobility and firepower support to airborne forces and to change the tides of battle by being dropped from the sky to assist said troops. The development of the M551 Sheridan began in the late 1950s, as mentioned before, as a response to the need for a lightweight and air transportable tank. At the time, the US Army's M41 Walker Bulldog tank weighed in at over 20 tons, which made it too heavy for the application role that the Army wanted to slot it into. So the primary objective became to create a vehicle that could be deployed by air and provide armored firepower on the battlefield in instances where the recently dropped airborne troops could not wait for armored support to arrive on the ground. During its development timeline, the Soviet Union threw a wrench in the plans because they unveiled their new amphibious PT-76 light tank, which in true Cold War fashion radically shifted the development and design requirements of the Army's new tank. Now, besides being lightweight and airdroppable, the new design also had to be amphibious. And the lucrative nature of this potential contract got everybody jumping into the fray with their design for this new light tank. A dozen or so proposals were received for the project, and by the end, just one remained. This proposal came from Cadillac and would be assigned the designation XM551, later to be called the Sheridan after American Civil War General Philip Sheridan. The first prototypes of the Sheridan tanks were completed in 1962 and became ready for initial testing. Interestingly, the overall construction of the M551 Sheridan's hull was made from aluminum to save weight, while the turret itself utilized a typical steel construction to maintain its strength. As a result of these weight-saving measures, the finished Sheridans tipped the scales at just over 15.8 tons and would run an operational crew of 4 men: commander, a gunner, a loader, and a driver. The front aluminum armor on the Sheridan was rated to stop 20mm armor-piercing rounds, and the rest of the armor, meaning the sides and the rear, were bulletproof up through 50 caliber-esque rounds. The Sheridan was designed as an infantry support vehicle, not a main battle tank to go toe-to-toe with the Soviet tanks, hence its relatively weak armor. The Sheridan was powered by a Detroit diesel 6V53T engine, which made about 300 horsepower and allowed the Sheridan to reach a top speed of about 40 miles per hour on land and a tragic 3 miles per hour while traversing water when it needed to go amphibious. The Sheridan's amphibious system itself was actually pretty interesting. The M551 Sheridans all packed a retractable flotation screen that was housed within the hull of the tank. This screen could be erected for water crossing and give the tank the flotation it needed to stay above the water. While in the water, the Sheridan would use its tracks as its form of propulsion. This on one hand alleviated the need for separate water jets, but it also severely hampered speed. And when they deployed the flotation screen, it greatly reduced visibility as a trade-off. However, the most fascinating feature of the Sheridan itself wasn't its amphibious nature, or its pretty rad ability to be dropped from the sky. It was actually its main armament. The Sheridans came equipped with the M51E1 152mm rifled main gun, 150 cal, and 130 cal machine gun for support. But the 152mm main gun wasn't a typical main battle tank cannon as you would have seen on any other tank at the time. The main gun was technically referred to as a gun launcher because it had the ability to fire conventional rounds and guided M551 missiles out of the same gun. The Sheridan's unique main armament proved to be an exciting concept, but in execution, its short barrel hampered its range and the accuracy of traditional shells, which essentially made it so the Sheridan needed to rely on missiles that it came with for larger armored targets at range, which was the only way the Sheridan could truly engage these targets, as in a toe-to-toe battle with another tank, close range, the Sheridan would struggle to survive that fight unless conditions were to its severe advantage due to its relative lack of armor. However, these missiles themselves were rarely used in its service in the Vietnam theater, although they did see some use in the Gulf War. The M551 Sheridan served from 1968 until the late 1990s in combat duty, and they first saw combat in Vietnam, which was their first true test of battlefield fitness. The lack of large-scale tank combat in Vietnam was to the advantage of the Sheridan, and it meant that its initial M81E1 gun launcher usage was very good and especially effective at clearing out fortifications and light vehicles. Specifically, the Sheridan's M625 canister round, which held 10,000 separate flechettes, was exceptionally devastating when used against enemy infantry, even in the thickly wooded jungle, which that weapon alone sounds like nightmare fuel to me. Imagine a 12 gauge with birdshot multiplied times infinity. That's what this must have been like. However, the light armor on the Sheridans did make them susceptible to being taken out by a well-placed mine or well-concealed RPG-man. The dense brush of the jungle also proved lots of strain on the engine and moving parts, causing tons of mechanical failures, even though in reality the thick jungles of Vietnam likely weren't a great place for any tank. It was no different for the Sheridan. After a combat hiatus after Vietnam, a small group of Sheridans were used in Operation Just Cause, which was the attempt to overthrow Manuel Noriega from his dictatorship in Panama in 1989. These Sheridans were airdropped into Panama and proved to be extremely effective against the Panamanian forces, albeit with two of them being severely damaged on the airdrop itself. And the Sheridans saw their final bit of combat duty in 1990 during Operation Desert Storm. This was the first time the guided missiles were truly used to great lengths by the Sheridan tanks, and they proved to be fairly effective in combat against some of the older Soviet armor in the area, but the platform was beginning to show its age, and it ended up serving primarily in that infantry support role as it could not go toe-to-toe with Saddam's larger tanks. Overall, just over 1,500 Sheridan tanks were built from the 1960s through the 1990s, and they saw conflict in 3 individual instances. The Sheridans were gradually phased out in the 90s due to their age and lack of purpose in comparison to newer tech. Most countries at the time had began fitting their infantry fighting vehicles with more effective armaments, while also still being able to safely transport troops inside of them, which was something that the Sheridan couldn't do, but the new Bradley infantry fighting vehicle could. The landscape of what the Army needed began to change, and as a result, the Sheridan was phased out after nearly 3 decades of faithful service, marking the end of the road for one of the most interesting vehicles in U.S. military history. But that is the abridged history of the M551 Sheridan tank. If you enjoyed this video, we would greatly appreciate it if you could drop a like and also share this video with other history buffs. Also, please make sure that you are subscribed to the War Machines YouTube channel and smash that notification bell for more documentary-style videos just like this on history's most fascinating combat vehicles. See you next week.